Maybe you just got into producing, maybe you just got into engineering and mixing, you just got a brand new copy of Logic Pro 10, and now you're looking through all your plugins, and now you're confused, you're overwhelmed, you don't know how to use any of the stuff. Well, guess what? I'm here to help you out. My name is El Marquis, musician, rapper, record producer, unashamed cross follower, and today I'm going to tell you the 5 most essential plugins in Logic Pro 10.
El Marquis Productions.
So when you're first starting to learn how to mix, there are a few essential tools that you need to learn how to use. As a matter of fact, if you only stick with using these 5 plugins, your mixes will actually sound pretty decent. Of course, there are a bunch of different tools that can take your mix to the next level and can make your mix stand out. But when you're just starting out, when you're just learning the fundamentals of getting a good sounding mix, it's not a bad idea to limit yourself to a few select tools and really learning how to use those and then learning how to use additional stuff. So I'm going to show you the 5 most essential plugins that you need to learn how to use. But before I help you out, I need you to help me out really quick. If you're someone who likes getting producer tips, if you like getting tips on specifically Logic Pro 10, if you like dope music, give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button, so that way you'll know whenever I drop more videos like this, and then you'll help the channel reach out to other people who have similar interests as you. So now I'm going to switch over to Logic Pro 10 and show you the 5 most essential plugins that you need to learn how to use. Before I get into the tips, I want to say that this video isn't meant to be a super in-depth tutorial on these plugins. I'm going to introduce their basic functions, their basic controls, the important functions that you need to know about, and if you want me to go any more in-depth on any of these plugins, drop a comment below, let me know. I'm also only going to be using stock plugins within Logic, and if you're using another DAW like Pro Tools or FL Studio, everything I'm saying in this video also applies to those DAWs. They have similar controls, the same functions, and you should master these plugins before you start getting into third-party plugins from companies like Waves or Slate Digital, FabFilter, Universal Audio. While these companies do make amazing plugins, if you don't understand how to use these basic ones in the first place, you'll be wasting money by buying all these different plugins. There's no magic plugin that's going to make your mix sound amazing. You need to have a really good understanding of how to use them, and then once you master them, once you start making some money mixing, or when you start just getting more clients in general, if you're just starting out doing free work, then that will be the right time to start investing into third-party plugins. Now, enough of that ranting, let me get into what you actually want to know about. So the first tool we'll go over, one of the most essential ones that you need to know, if not the most essential, is EQ. You can just double click on that EQ right there, or you can go into the audio effects and go to EQ, pull up channel EQ. So what does an EQ do? So whenever you have a sound like this one here, which is a royalty-free loop from one of my free packs, if you want to use this loop, you can go down in the description below for the link to download it for free. But whenever you have a sound, it fits somewhere within the frequency spectrum. Depending on the sound, it'll have energy anywhere in between these bands. That's 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. So let me play this loop for you really quick so you can hear it, and you'll be able to see its frequencies on this EQ. So as you can see, it had information coming up all throughout over here. Pretty much throughout a lot of the EQ. Alright, cool, so it has information. Great. Now, what does this tool actually do? Well, you can use this tool to boost frequencies, you can use it to cut frequencies. So I'll give you an example of a way that you actually can use this. So I'll play this. Let's say this was a completed idea and you had an 808 in there. Well, in this melody in particular, you probably don't need anything below 100 hertz because that's where the 808 will live. So you can click this right here and you could drag this all the way up to, let's say, 100 for right now. You also can double click on it and just type in the number. And now, you may not hear that big of a difference, but everything below 100 hertz is now cut out. Let's say you wanted to make this sound really thin so that there's little to no low end in it at all. Well, you can just drag it up even further. So now it's back. And now it's gone. So what you're hearing right there is that there's pretty much no low end in it at all. It's just some of the mids and the highs that are left in it. I'll drag this back. Let's say you wanted to brighten up the sound a little bit. Well, then you could take this band, you could drag it up, this is called a boost. This is a cut because you're taking something away. This is a boost, so you can boost up this frequency right here. You can widen it if you want to affect other frequencies in a broad way, or you can narrow it to just narrow it down to more specific frequencies that you want to boost, and that'll bring out all the frequencies that you boosted right here. So I'll bring it back down. Here I'm gonna boost. So you hear how it got more bright, a little more harsh, just because of where I'm specifically boosting it. Let's say you wanted to bring out more of the mids. You could bring this down over here. You could use another one of these notches, boost it. So that's a bit extreme, but that just gives you a little bit of an idea. So this right here is called a high pass filter because you're cutting out all the lows. Here is a low pass filter, which does the exact opposite. It takes out the high end of a sound. So I'll play that for you. So it kind of sounds like you're putting a blanket over the sound to muffle it. Some people also refer to this as the underwater effect. So when it comes to using an EQ, some of the basic things you need to understand is what a low cut is or a high pass filter, what a high cut or a low pass filter is, the difference between boosting your frequency and cutting your frequency, why you want to do either, and where all your instruments should show up on the frequency spectrum. The low end instruments such as 808s, basses, and when you understand how to use an EQ, that's going to be one of the tools that you use most frequently. Easily one of the most important ones. Also, to get started out, if you want to get some really basic ideas of how to use an EQ on certain instruments, you can go into the presets and you can look for different ones and experiment with how they affect the sound of your instrument. So let's pull up this piano one. Let's just see what this looks like. So that could give you a good starting point if you like how it sounds. However, I wouldn't rely on using presets to mix a whole song because every song is different, every sound is different. Presets can't listen to a sound and tell you that it needs more low end or needs less high end or needs more mids or anything like that. So I really wouldn't rely on using EQ presets. I might use a couple if they do something specific, like let's say the telephone effect. Like I use that a lot when someone asks me to do that on their vocals. But I usually don't rely on presets to mix a song for me. So they're cool, they could give you a good starting place, but if you don't understand what they're doing, learn what they're doing, and then learn how to effectively use an EQ without using them. Cool, so that was one plugin. The next plugin that you need to learn how to use is compressor. So you click on audio effects, go down to dynamics, and pull up a compressor. So what a compressor does is it takes the dynamics of a track, whether it's vocals, whether it's drums, that have points where they're quiet and other points where they're loud, and then what it does is it tries to decrease the dynamics of them so that they're not as extreme, they're not as all over the place. They don't necessarily have to be all at one level, but they should, instead of, let's say, going like this and like a zigzag, let's say, it'll look a little bit more straight, if that makes any type of sense. Compressors are honestly one of the more difficult tools to really understand how to use, but when you really start studying it, when you really start practicing using it, it'll start making a little bit more sense later on. The essential controls that you need to learn how to use are the attack, the release, threshold, ratio, and makeup gain. So when it comes to setting the attack for your compressor, that means how fast it's going to react to a sound. Is it going to hear it and compress it immediately? Is it going to let some of the transients pass through and then compress it? And then with the release, it's pretty much the opposite. How fast is it going to release the compression? Is it gonna grab onto it and just keep holding onto it? Is it gonna grab onto it and just let it go? The ratio is how hard the compression is. So for example, if it's 1-to-1, it's not doing anything. When you set the threshold, if it goes past a certain volume, that's when the compressor will turn the signal down. And you use the makeup gain to add back any volume that you took away. So for example, if you compressed 5 decibels of a sound, you would turn the makeup gain 5 dB, and you don't always need to use a compressor on all of your instruments. So for example, if you have a vocal that's very dynamic, you probably would use a compressor on it, like a rap vocal or singing vocal, if it's a voiceover. But if you're using a high quality drum sample that's already been compressed, it wouldn't necessarily need a compressor. If you have a track that has dynamics and you want to decrease its dynamics or smooth them out, like a vocal or a live guitar, live drums, then you could increase the quality of the sound, smooth out the dynamics by using a compressor. If you have something like a high quality drum sample, maybe a software synthesizer that you're using, you may or may not need to use it. You might not, but that's not up for me to decide. That's always up for you. It's just whatever sounds good to you. Oh, and one other really quick thing I want to go over is that different compressors have different sounds. So for example, this compressor has these different models right here that give your signal just different character, different sound. That's why people invest into third-party compressors, because if you get a compressor from somewhere, for Universal Audio, for example, they model their compressors after ones that you would find in a big professional studio. And while they all do the same job, they just color the sound in a different way. All right, so now we knocked out EQ and compression. And if you master those two tools by themselves, you already can get a really good mix. So now the next tool that we'll cover is Reverb. And the cool thing about Logic is that it has a few different reverbs to choose from. I'll just choose Reverb. So the easiest way that I can explain Reverb is that it makes it sound like you're putting your instrument or your track into its own space. So for example, when you walk into a church and if you were to clap, you would hear your clap ring off of the different walls, the different glass. It's like a type of echo. If you go into a bathroom and you try clapping or singing, you'll hear your voice bouncing off of the walls, bouncing off the glass, and you can hear that room noise. So a reverb plugin, basically it puts your instrument into a specific space. You can use it to add more space or dimension to your song or to your specific instrument. You can use it to push things back in the mix and make them sound like they're further away. And you can use some of these knobs to affect how big the room is, how small the room is, how long the reverb actually lasts. And one thing too about using reverb is that normally you can put it directly on the track. The way I would normally recommend, especially if you're using it on, say, like a vocal or a guitar, I would actually put it on a bus. So actually click over here where it says sends, go down to bus, go down to any available bus, doesn't matter which one, as long as you remember which one you're using. Click on it. I would recommend labeling it so you can stay organized and you know which one you're using. So you could label it reverb, you could label it chroma verb, you could label it long reverb, short reverb. The title doesn't matter as long as you know which one it is. And if you do use it on a bus, you turn your dry signal all the way down, and your dry signal is the signal that's not being touched by the reverb, and then you'll turn your wet signal all the way up to 100% because that is the sound of the reverb. And then you'll take this knob right here and you'll turn it up or turn it down based on your taste, and that will add reverb to the sound. So let me show you what this sounds like. So here, as I increase the volume of the reverb, it sounds like it's pushed further back, like it's in a bigger room. I'll also show you what it sounds like when it's placed directly on the track. So I'll put it right on it and I'll mix the dry and wet signals together. And if you were to put it directly on the track and you were messing with the dry and wet signals like that, you can just affect the sound in a different way. So basically you will use reverb to put all of your tracks into its own particular space to add ambience. Depending on the genre, you will probably use some amount of reverb on a lot of different tracks, like your vocals or a piano or a guitar, a synthesizer. A track without reverb is kind of just sounds dry. It sounds like it's missing something. It sounds a little bland. It can sound unnatural because naturally when you play an instrument in a room, you'll hear the room react to it. But then when you add different amounts of reverb across the track, things do start to sound a lot more natural, like your ear is used to hearing. All right, cool. So we got reverb down. The next plugin that you should learn how to use is delay. So click on audio effects again, go down to delay. And just like with the reverb, Logic has a few different options for your delays. I'll go to echo because it's the easiest one to demonstrate. So when you put a delay on the instrument, it basically echoes or repeats the instrument a certain amount of times. It helps to know some basic music theory, know different note values such as a quarter note or an eighth note or a 16th note, know what triplets are. Because if you want your delays lined up to the grid, they'll be matched up by these different note values. The dry and wet signal is the exact same thing with the reverb. Dry is the signal signal that's not being affected at all by the delay, while the wet signal is the one that's being affected by the delay. I would also probably use it on a bus, so I click down here, go to bus, put it on bus 2. I could call this, let's say for right now, I'd call this quarter note delay or 1/4 delay. And then if I'm using it on a bus, then I would take that dry signal all the way down, the wet signal all the way up, and then this affects how much of that delay will be added. So here it just repeats over and over again. And then also, forgot to mention this, the feedback. So this affects the amount of repeats. So if I turn it down, it'll repeat a couple of times. Then if I turn it up, it just keeps repeating until whenever. And the color is kind of like an EQ for the echo. Like it'll make it darker or brighter. And adding delay is another way of adding space and ambience to a track, to a whole song. You could use a delay in place of a reverb on, let's say, rap vocals, for example. In certain styles of music, guitars can have delays on them, your synthesizers can. So using different reverbs and using different delays in combination with each other could add different spaces and different dimensions to your tracks, to your whole song. Some tracks would sound good with some reverb on them, some tracks would sound good with some echo on them. And with delays and reverbs, sometimes playing with the presets actually can do something cool for you. Also forgot to mention, but like for example with the compressor, you probably don't want to use a preset as the endpoint, for example, because the song can't tell you how much a signal needs to be compressed. But if you use a preset on, like, let's say a reverb or a delay, you'll still probably want to tweak it, especially the reverb if you want to get the timing of it right. But some of those presets can be used as creative effects. And the final essential plugin that we'll go over in this video is a limiter. So let me pull it up really quick. This one I'm going to show you on the master track. So you go to audio effects, you go to dynamics, and then you'll pull up the adaptive limiter. So what is this thing? If you've ever exported your song or your beat and you wondered why it's so quiet, well, this will actually get your tracks to be louder. So after you've completed your mix, you should leave some headroom on your master channel, your stereo out channel, so that way you can master your song or your beat. And one of the functions of mastering is to get your songs to compete volume-wise against other commercial tracks. So if you're starting out and you're making songs, you're wondering why your songs sound a lot quieter than songs on the radio, well, that's probably because you didn't use a limiter. So how the limiter works is you'll set a ceiling on it. So if you're mastering a song for streaming purposes, for example, the standard is -1 dB. Then as you increase the volume of your signal, it'll never go past -1 dB. And then the way it achieves the loudness is that it acts as a compressor, which really is what a limiter is. It's actually very hard compression. So basically it will increase the volume of everything in your song. It will compress the dynamics. So you need to be careful about how much of this you actually add, because if you add too much, yes, your song will be louder, but then it will have less dynamics. It could sound too squished. It could sound like the track just isn't breathing. It also can add unwanted distortion that, depending on your genre of music, may or may not sound good. So let me show you how it sounds on this loop. So this isn't the best example because this is a loop and not a full song. I'm actually gonna increase the gain of this really quick so I can really hit this limiter hard. So as you can see, now on the stereo out is not going past -1 dB no matter how loud I push it. So for the sake of example, let's say this was a full song. There is a target loudness that you should aim for, but if your goal is to just make the song as loud as possible, you would just keep pushing the gain until you start hearing some unwanted distortion and you start backing off, and then you'll be good to go. That's something that you can do when starting out. With this tool, and a little bonus tip, I would recommend using something to meter your volume with. So I will pull up the multimeter. Normally your limiter will be the last plugin in the chain on your master channel, and then you put any of your analyzers after it, and then you'll be able to check the loudness of your track by using the LUFS meter as well as the RMS meter. But But that's a tutorial for another video. So to summarize what we went over, the 5 most important plugins you need to learn how to use is EQ, a compressor, reverb, delay, and your limiter. You can get a really good mix by number 1, leveling all your sounds correctly, and then knowing how to use these different tools. After you learn how to use these tools, that's when you can start learning how to use different tools such as distortion or saturation, different filter tools, different tools that can shape the transients of your instruments. After you get a good understanding of them, you also may want to start investing into plugins from other companies such as Waves or Universal Audio or Slate Digital. The same job, they can just, some of them can sound better, some of them can have additional functions that also can help you out. But like I said at the beginning of this video, make sure that you understand how to use these tools before you spend any money on plugins, because there's no magic plugin out there that's going to make your mixes sound good on their own. You need to learn how to use these tools and how to use them properly, and then that's when your mixes will start to sound good. So now you just learned about the 5 most essential plugins that you need to know how to use in order to mix your music. Thank you for watching this video. If you like what you've seen today, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you know whenever I upload new videos. Also be sure to visit my website, elmarquisproductions.com, where you'll be able to check out my music, my beats, my sample kits, my merchandise, and my mixing, mastering, and consulting services. Now go down in the comment section below and let me know, do you want me to do a more in-depth video on any of these plugins? Do you want me to show you some more plugins that you need to learn how to use? Let me know in the comment section below. My name is El Marquis Productions. God bless.